What is up, guys, and welcome back to Empty Pockets. I hope you're having an awesome day so far. So in today's video, we are going to talk about grading your Pokemon cards. So obviously, we all know that getting a PSA 10 or a black label, etc. can increase the value of your card. It is no secret that when you go ahead and grade the most hype cards like the Charizard from 151, the Bubble Mew from Paldean Fates, and the Umbreon VMAX from Evolving Skies, they will all go for pretty wild prices if they get those high grades. This is obviously all good and well if you have a lot of dollar up front to go ahead and pick up these cards in raw form. But what if I told you there are some pretty budget raw cards out there that if you get these high grades, you can make pretty decent money from? I've got your attention now, right? So I have went ahead and put a little list together of some cards that if you hit a PSA 10 on, you will see some very significant gains with a low upfront cost. Obviously, this is not financial advice. If you're going to go ahead and do this, I advise you to do your own research. Obviously, make sure that the cards you are buying have the best possibility of getting a PSA 10, as that is not guaranteed. Believe me, I have tried many times, and even cards that I thought were a sure-in for a PSA 10 have come back 9s, 8s, sometimes even worse. So do your own research, but with that said, let's get into this list. So first up, we have the Bulbasaur illustration rare from Stellar Crown. This card to me is absolutely awesome. It's super colourful and Bulbasaur is looking as cute as can be, so what's not to like? In terms of picking this up raw, in the US you are looking at $46, while in the UK you are looking at an average of £40. If you manage to hit that PSA 10, the price jumps up to around $170 in the US and £130 here in the UK. Next up, we have the Eevee illustration rare from Twilight Masquerade. This card is absolutely beautiful and starting to see gains even in raw form, and obviously you can see why, just look at it. In the US, you can pick this up raw for around $62, and in the UK, you can get this for under £50 mark if you look hard enough. In a PSA 10, you're looking at $207 in the US and an average of around £150 here in the UK. Next up, we have the Squirtle illustration rare from 151. Another absolutely beautiful card with Squirtle just loving life, bathing in the ocean. Raw prices for this card in the US are around the $40 mark, and in the UK, you can pick these up for around £30. In a PSA 10, you are looking at around $200 in the US and around £180 here in the UK. Next up, we have one of my favourite cards from Obsidian Flames, and that is the Ninetales illustration rare. I'll be honest, I have no idea why this card is going so cheap, as the artwork is absolutely outstanding, but if you pick this up raw in the US, you can have it for around $18, and in the UK, you're looking at an average of around £12. But obviously, deals can be found for sure, so always have a good look. In a PSA 10, you are looking at $142 in the US, and in the UK, it is around £110. So that is a pretty good markup if you ask me. Next up, we have a card that I'm sure everyone has seen, and that is the Special Delivery Charizard. Raw, you are looking at paying around $43 in the US and £35 here in the UK. In a PSA 10, the price does shoot all the way up to $243 in the US and £190 here in the UK, so pretty solid gains to be seen, especially if you are lucky enough to go ahead and pick these up in a bulk deal, which eBay is absolutely full of. So just do your research when you're picking these up, as you can pick them up pretty cheap, especially if you buy bulk. Next up, we have the Ivysaur illustration rare from Pokemon 151, another card that I absolutely love. Just look at my guy checking himself out in the water reflection. Honestly, this is an outstanding card. Raw, these can be had for as little as $26 in the US and £26 here in the UK. In a PSA 10, you're looking at $170 in the US and £120 here in the UK. Although what I will say is that the UK market is a little slow on the sales front for this card, so just bear that in mind when you go ahead and pick it up. But I'm pretty sure you will be hard pushed to lose money on this card if you manage to get it in a PSA 10. Next up, we have the Charizard EX Special Illustration Rare from Obsidian Flames. Raw copies of this card can be had for around $65 in the US and an average of around £42 here in the UK. With this card being hard to grade in a PSA 10, you are looking at an average of around $340 in the US and £280 here in the UK. As I said, this card is super hard to hit in a PSA 10. I have sent 5 or 6 away of these cards, and the best I have managed is a PSA 9 so far. So just bear that in mind. You'll really have to find excellent copies if you're going to get a PSA 10. So just be a little wary with this card, but it was worthwhile including it in the list, as if you get a PSA 10, the markup is pretty incredible. Next up, we have another card from 151. What an awesome set that was. And that is the Special Illustration Rare Bulbasaur. In raw form, you are looking at around $37 in the US and £30 here in the UK. In a PSA 10 in the US, you are looking at around $200, and here in the UK, the last sale was around £195. Another 151 card that is doing well is the Venusaur EX Special Illustration Rare. Raw prices are sitting around $70 in the US and around £60 here in the UK for decent copies. In a PSA 10, you are looking at around $250 in the US, and in the UK, we are seeing listings and sold absolutely all over the place, with the cheapest listings around £290. Again, this does seem a pretty hard card to sell in the UK, but one definitely worth grading if you have sitting in your pile. So last up, and no surprise, we are still on Pokemon 151, but this time we have the Wartortle Illustration Rare. In the US, copies are averaging around $25, while in the UK, this can be had for as little as £23. In a PSA 10, in the US, you are looking at around $200 for this card, and in the UK, the last sold was around £180. So that pretty much rounds up this list. Obviously, there are plenty of cards that I haven't mentioned that if you do your research, you will find for under $50, £50 if you're here in the UK, that if you grade in a PSA 10, you can make significant gains on. So it really does pay not to follow the trends, not to always just hope you hit that special illustration rare that's going for $400, $500 raw to grade in a PSA 10. Yes, you can make plenty of money doing that, but there is easier ways and cheaper ways of doing it if you're lucky enough to get a PSA 10. So let me know what your favourite card from this list was. Let me know if you have any cards that you are picking up cheap and grading down below to help everyone else out. And as always, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe, be kind to each other, and I will catch you on the next one.